of King Tut's head. Could this be the wound that killed him?
If you look at the skull, you'll find there is a hole in the back of the head.
There is a lot of damage to the upper vertebrae, perhaps even the base of the skull, at the foramen magnum, the place it connects.
The wound is consistent with damage done in an attack.
That hole made everyone to believe that the golden boy was murdered.
Did the young king meet a violent death? A clue might lie in the ancient process of mummification. Mummification is as old as Egypt.
No one's very sure how the ancient Egyptians decided to mummify the dead, but presumably because the desert naturally dries out people. When animals die and lie in the desert, the Egyptians would have seen those and they would see that they were perfectly preserved. First thing that the Egyptians did was to really desiccate the body, and they did this by using something called natron. Without natron, you couldn't make a mummy.
Natron works like the sachets of silica gel that are used to keep electronic equipment dry today.
Natron's basically a mixture of salt and baking soda, and what it does is it just draws away all the liquid in your body, and that's what makes a mummy.
But certain organs have too much water in them to mummify in this way.
You leave the organs in, they sort of rot and explode. So the next step was to remove the internal organs and the brain. They'd actually cut off the head, poke it, prod it out, and then leave it empty.
So could the head wound in fact be a result of the mummification process, rather than an injury that killed him? At the University of Pennsylvania, Janet Monge has been studying the CT scans of King Tut's mummy.
When damage occurs before the time of death of an individual, it's called antemortem damage, and generally if it's on bone or tissue, you'll see some healing if the person lived. This looks like a post-mortem damage. It could be something that occurred at the time of the embalming process.
The hole in King Tut's skull is consistent with the type of hole made during the mummification process.
It has nothing to do at all with murder or anything, and there is no foul play.
How the king died remains a mystery, but science can help to reveal how he lived. To get inside the head and life of a ruler of Egypt. It appears the pharaoh did not look as regal as his death mask suggests.
He has this nice square chin. Except for that, his face is quite slender, quite slight. Of course, I don't think you would want to make fun of the king, but if the king was in a schoolyard, I think that he might be the kid that you gave the little nickname to, like Bucky or something like that.
The scans clearly show the boy king had buck teeth, unlike his famous mask. The treasure with which the boy king was buried is revealing more insights. Tutankhamun's tomb has produced more riches than all the discoveries of Egypt put together. This famous mask was buried with 6 whole chariots and millions of dollars worth of gold. But what makes this burial unique is the fact it was found absolutely intact.
Beyond the sheer razzle-dazzle bullion factor of all this gold that is measured in hundreds of pounds practically, we have a complete set of burial equipment of a pharaoh of Egypt.
The artifacts go some way to reveal the personality of the pharaoh. They were designed to the same standard as those he would have used in life.
It's amazing to us that they would expend so much energy to create something like one of these little jar stoppers made of alabaster. And they're perfect, exquisite works of art. But they were never meant to be seen by people. They were buried in the king's tomb, never to be seen again.
The type of artifacts and the care with which they are crafted give us an insight into how Tutankhamun lived.
The Egyptians believed that your afterlife was much like this life, except better. So you had to take everything with you.
The objects Tutankhamun wanted in his tomb and the afterlife were the ones he had enjoyed during his lifetime.
We know that he liked a particular Egyptian game called Senet because he was buried with everything from a large formal Senate board and box table to a tiny little traveler version made of ivory that was only about this big.
Tutankhamun was the supreme ruler of a superpower. These artifacts remind us of his youth and perhaps offer us a glimpse of his character. Where Carter's discovery showed the world the pharaoh, modern science is showing us the man. Further investigations of the tomb's artifacts and Tut's mummy are likely to reveal more details about the real human being behind the mask. But in ancient Egypt, like today, the vast majority of the population were not kings and queens. They were ordinary working men and women who formed the heart of a nation. Through the next discovery, Egyptologists can get a glimpse of these ordinary people, the citizens of ancient Egypt. Ten great discoveries made in Egypt reveal an extraordinary civilization. But while the ruins that stand let us see what ancient Egypt looked like, it's much harder to know how its people behaved.
It really is a peephole, a voyeuristic peephole into life in ancient Egypt.
The fifth discovery offers a chance to understand the lives of ordinary citizens in the town of the tomb builders. The town of Deir el-Medina gives a rare insight into daily life in ancient Egypt. It stood on the west bank of the Nile. The remains of an uncontaminated Egyptian town make a rare and very valuable discovery.
Deir el-Medina remains pretty much untouched as the villagers left it, so this is really a huge resource for archaeologists in reconstructing the lives of ancient Egyptians.
It survives because it was built of stone. Most other ancient Egyptian towns were built on the Nile floodplain from mud brick, which washes away.
The spectacular and very lucky thing about Deir el-Medina is that it survived at all.
It was home to 280 people, and it was built in an unlikely location. It's high up in the desert, an hour's walk from the Valley of the Kings. This leads archaeologists to believe that it was purpose-built to house the people who worked in the valley.
They were charged with the building, the constructing, and also the decoration of the king's tombs in the valley.
Families appear to have lived in their own single-story houses.
This is actually the front door of a house that really I believe that this man was one of the overseers and he should be a very influential person.
Craftsmen, goldsmiths, and tomb builders held high status in a land where most of the population worked long, hard hours as farmers.
Workmen had a pretty cushy job when it comes down to it. It seems that on average they worked maybe 2 out of 3 days. They would receive fish and wine on special occasions. They probably liked the job that they had.
As well as constructing the tombs of their pharaohs, the citizens of Deir el-Medina built their own. And by examining artwork on their walls, archaeologists can begin to piece together the lives of the people who lived there.
We can really actually learn a lot about daily life from Deir el-Medina tombs.
The art shows a thriving community of prosperous and successful individuals. But the paintings on the walls reveal how the villagers wanted to be seen, not how they actually were.
When you look at the tombs, when you look at the monuments, they're on their best behavior, dressed in their Sunday best, living an ideal life. But it's an ideal.
But there is further evidence that offers clues as to the private lives of the citizens.
All kinds of things are going on, stuff that they didn't necessarily want you to know about.
The clues are everywhere.
The whole cliffs around the city are limestone. So any piece of the mountain that comes off at a nice flat angle like this is a potential riding surface.